Hi, everyone. It's Erin Kang, the project lead for Reimagining Governance from the Ontario Nonprofit Network.
And Linda Mollenhauer, the project lead from Ignite NPS.
Thank you for clicking play. In this quick 50-minute video, we are here to give you an update on some of the exciting progress that we have made over the past several months. Reimagining Governance is aiming to generate new and innovative approaches to the way we do governance in nonprofit organizations by provoking a shift in how we talk, think about, and fulfill governance. There's two big ways we're doing this. The first is by generating a sense of urgency and excitement about the need and potential of doing things differently amongst key influencers. We know that we won't ever be successful if we only focus on nonprofit organizations in a silo. We need to work with the many enablers in the governance ecosystem, like foundations, government funders, and capacity builders, if we're really going to innovate.
We're also hoping to provoke a shift in the way we do governance by creating different kinds of pathways for organizations to explore their governance design, which Reimagining Governance is calling a transformative design process. We want to talk about two things today. One is to describe this process, and the other is to share with you why we think it's a unique approach to how to think about governance.
As you may have seen, we've developed a map illustrating a nonprofit organization's governance system with all of its interconnected components. We're aiming here to provide a bird's eye view of the many parts in an organization's governance, including the actual role of governance that isn't just described as board roles and responsibilities. The map reminds us that governance is part of a bigger system, but that there are also binding rules that must be followed. It shows us that there are four important interconnected enablers. These are the culture, people, structures, and processes within a nonprofit organization that we identify as a playground. And that's because this is the space where organizations can experiment with and really shape their governance to fit their own unique circumstances. It also demonstrates that transformative change can't happen if you just focus on one of the enablers because everything is interconnected.
So, reimagining governance is using this map as the framework for the transformative design process. And there are two ways you can participate in it. One is a deeper immersion into the organization's governance design. Here's a picture of that journey. So getting started, once the organization is clear about what it wants to achieve and who will be involved, it reflects on all the influencers shaping its governance and then maps it with all of its unique variables. Governance leaders then do some visioning and create aspirations for its governance design, which we're going to talk some more about in a few minutes. From there, the process gets practical, determining how do we get from where we are now to achieving those aspirations? What needs to happen? What are those 5% shifts that can bring about the most important changes? The process will happen over a number of months. There's also a lighter touch version of the transformative design process. It's an educational resource which describes all the components of the map that Erin talked about. It includes tools and conversation sparkers, which we hope will uncover some of those assumptions that might be holding an organization's governance to more traditional approaches, and leads to insights and ideas about new and innovative ways to do it. So bottom line, our intent is to disrupt, because disrupting is always fun to do, but also to help organizations to reframe their governance and create their best possible governance design.
Right. So we believe that there are three ways that the transformative design processes disrupt and reframe how we typically think about and do governance work. So, number one, we are not creating another model or just describing best practices. As we mentioned, the transformative design process will guide organizations through a journey of reflection, discovery, and action, which allows organizations to find their own innovations based on their unique circumstances. Because as we know and experience, there is no one model or even best practice that will work for everyone. Things like the stage that you're at in your organizational life cycle, the nature of your work, even where you're incorporated have a big impact on how an organization approaches its governance. And governance is a dynamic thing. As conditions change, the design of governance should shift with those changing conditions. It's not something to remain static. And it's hard to be dynamic when you're confined to a model mentality. Realistically, organizations cannot just squish themselves into a one size fits all model. Nonprofits are not cats.
Exactly. The second way the transformative design process disrupts and reframes is by looking at governance through this wider lens of the system we showed you, acknowledging that it's complex with lots of moving and interconnected parts. If you've ever wondered why governance is so difficult to do, this is why. Taking the systems approach is different than the norm. Uh, so many resources out there tend to focus on how to create more effective boards, which is important to do, but it's not the full picture. We know that boards are absolutely critical to governance, but they aren't the only way that governance is fulfilled. One of the resources in the process describes the requirements and responsibilities that the board of directors have to meet, and no other person or entity can do them. It kind of strips it down to the essentials because it's just based on what the law and regulation says. We actually think a lot of people will be surprised at what those essentials are. For example, the board needs to approve the strategic plan, but it doesn't have to create it. So the board ensures it's meeting those requirements and responsibilities. Then possibilities open up to find new approaches to fulfilling governance functions so the board doesn't feel it has to do it all. The exploration might start by asking the question differently than we usually ask it. For example, instead of asking, how can we get all the competencies we need on the board to do all our governance work, the questions reframe to, who's in the best position to, for example, do strategic planning? What competencies do we need? Where are we going to find these competencies? It naturally leads down the path to a more shared leadership approach.
Right, love it. And that's just one example. Let me give you a couple others. So let's take culture, for example. This wider lens on governance also provides us an opportunity to make the governance culture more visible and create a better understanding about how that shapes the way that an organization does its governance. We all intuitively know that culture, so including our biases, our assumptions, our worldviews, drive how almost everything, including governance, is done. Most organizations have spent time thinking about their culture, and especially recently around issues of equity and inclusion, but not as many organizations have really examined and unpacked it, especially from the perspective of their governance specifically. It really raises questions like, how are governance leaders' biases and perspectives shaping the strategic decisions about how organizations bring about their missions? As well, most organizations will consider the opportunities and threats facing their organization, but fewer are really going to think about how those trends and forces specifically shape the way that their governance is done. And also looking out to the future, how things might be done differently to respond to them. So these are just some of the ways that having a wider lens on governance really helps to disrupt and reframe.
So the last way that the transformative design process hopes to disrupt and reframe is by taking an aspirations-based approach to strengthening governance rather than the very often used problem-solution approach. Our research found that the challenge with identifying a specific governance problem and then trying to fix it is that the organization is often fixing symptoms, not digging into the real root issues. For example, and this again is a very timely one, a problem is often framed as, how do we make our board more diverse? We definitely need to make our boards more diverse, but the way the question is framed constricts thinking. What if you take a more aspirational, more expansive approach? For example, the question might be, how does our organization ensure there is diversity in our governance decision making? It doesn't presume that it's just a matter of how you populate the board. It opens up more possibilities about who and how decisions are made.
Exactly. And here's an example of an aspiration that really gets at what you're saying, Linda. So it's adapted from a set of governance principles developed by an environmental education media nonprofit called Dream Writer Production Society that felt, in their words, that they had been burned by traditional models of governance. They decided to reinvent their governance as a custom solution. So this included setting principles that would drive it, and they call it evolutionary governance. So we've taken some great liberties here and we've done a bit of paraphrasing, but they provide really good examples of governance aspirations. And I'm going to share one with you right now. So we will hold shared power and responsibility in the spirit of collaboration, mutual trust, and listening, where leadership and power is distributed to where and who in the system is in the best position to exercise it. So, if we think about reimagining how governance might work based on this aspiration, what kinds of things would that make possible? Well, first, it would really kick off an important conversation about who's in the best position to fulfill different kinds of governance functions, rather than just starting from this assumption that the board has to do all of it. This could take an organization to a much more distributed, shared leadership model where governance is being shared between the board and the staff, as well as a broader network of contributors. The broader network could be a way to draw in a more expansive set of competencies needed to govern well. Could the board be seen less as the home of governance and more as the host of governance? Right? So asking questions like, what do we need to change? Whose voices need to be heard? And what kind of culture would we need to enable this aspiration to become reality? So an aspirations based approach really helps to expand this conversation and help push the dialogue closer towards actually generating some innovation in governance.
Great. Okay, so we've shared with you some of what we believe are unique approaches to the way we talk and think about governance. Also, we shared some of our directions that, and if you've been following Reimagining Governance, you'll know this is a very iterative initiative, but that's where we're at the moment.
Yes, super iterative. Just one example for you is instead of having one sort of fixed advisory group with us throughout this whole process, we have hosted many design pods that form and reform as we go along that have really been instrumental in informing and shaping what we have today. And this approach has really allowed us to draw from a wider network of people and also have a much more fluid process. So, our next steps are to continue drawing from the experience and knowledge of Design Pod participants. We're also going to be hosting a handful of learning labs in the new year, where we will walk alongside various nonprofit organizations in a facilitated deep dive of the transformative design process, where these labs are really going to be an opportunity for us to experiment with the process, take those learnings and improve the process to get it ready for activation in the fall. And we also hope to generate some stories of innovation that we can share more broadly. And we're really excited to host some more public workshops that will really dig into some of the tools and resources in our transformative design process.
Lots happening this winter. Thanks for sharing in this journey with us, this exciting journey. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. And be sure to check out the resources that are already on our webpage and stay in touch. And that information will be available for you right here, right now.
Great.
Bye,
Take care.
everyone.